I'm James Lynch, and this is the stock report for UFC 297. If you haven't watched the show before, I'm going to be going over the biggest riser and the biggest faller of UFC 297. And you saw it in the thumbnail there. I think it goes without saying the biggest riser, the biggest person whose stock went up the most was Dricus du Plessis because he's the middleweight champion. Plain and simple, whether you agreed or not with the decision, du Plessis is the first South African UFC champion. It's a big deal, him winning this title. He was the underdog in this fight. And I think he answered a lot of questions, a number of things. I mean, there were some people that felt like he got a bit of a fluke win over Robert Whittaker because Whittaker was supposedly injured going into the fight and all these different things. And, you know, there's questions about his cardio. You know, he didn't look good in the Darren Till fight and maybe he hasn't fought the competition. Du Plessis has to be the biggest winner on this card because not only does he have hardware, but he also, like I said, answered those questions. I mean, cardio is not an issue for du Plessis. He went 5 rounds with Sean Strickland, who's known for his cardio, was not a factor in the fight last night. And, you know, again, he's at the top of the heap here. And it's pretty incredible what he's been able to do as well. I feel like every fight we've seen more and more. You know, he started off in 2020. I know he had some visa issues, some canceled fights. But over, you know, basically since July of 2022, look at this. 4 straight wins. You know, another decision here. But most of his wins have ended inside the distance. So, and, you know, again, like you just look at this past week and, you know, everyone's sort of cheering on Sean Strickland on the UFC 297 card. He was the fan favorite. There were fans last night chanting DDP in the crowd. He won people over this week, and that's a big thing. So to me, du Plessis had a great week for UFC 297, and he is my biggest riser on the card. And I think that goes without saying. And I'll go through some honorable mentions a bit later as far as some other risers on this card as well. But du Plessis is the biggest one for sure. And unfortunately, and this one really, this sucks as a Canadian for sure to mention this one, but the biggest faller, the person whose stock dropped the most on this card has got to be Mike Malott. Now, look, Mike was winning this fight, okay? At third round, Neil Magny gets him in a bad position. He finishes Malott, but Malott was on his way to winning this. And I think had he won, I think you could have made a case for his stock dropping a little bit as well, because again, it was not one of these like spectacular out of the cannon type performances like we've seen in all of his other fights. I mean, he set the bar pretty high, right? Finishing Mickey Gall in the first round, finishing Johan Lee Ness in the first round, finishing Adam Fugit in the second round. Like we were seeing this kind of progression like we've seen with so many fighters where they're getting the first round finishes against the competition they need to fight. And I saw a lot of people last night saying this was too soon for Mike Malott. I completely disagree. I think this is the perfect fight for him. And I think we know now that Mike Malott is not as talented as maybe we thought he is. Maybe he can get there later, but you know, he should be beating a Neil Magny. And this was a prime opportunity for him here. He's fighting Neil Magny coming off an injury and a loss to Ian Gary. He's got a full camp and he gets to fight in his hometown of Toronto. Like this was tailor-made for him to look good and perform well. And I thought he fought well, minus him getting finished in this fight, right? So I think for Malott, like, cause he was sort of the one Canadian you look at on the roster that you're like, okay, there could be some promise here. There could, you know, there could be some sort of progression. I don't think, you know, people saying like, oh, the next GSP, it wouldn't have never been that. The thing with Malott is he's 32 years old, right? So it's kind of now or never for him. If he was in his 20s and he was on this run, then this wouldn't be as big of a deal. But it's a huge deal for him now because we're talking about one of the deepest divisions in the UFC, in the welterweight division. And Mike Malott, I know it's just one loss, but you know, the trajectory for him was you beat Neil Magny, then you start getting these really notable ranked opponents. Magny is sort of the guy the UFC feeds to or gives fights against that if you beat him, then you're probably a pretty good fighter and someone that's moving up the rankings there. So it'll be interesting to see what they do next with Mike Malott, but I still have faith that he can turn this around. You know, he made a mistake late in the fight, but you know, again, he lost this fight. No matter what happens, he is one of the biggest droppers as far as his stock goes in the UFC just because he did lose this fight. So yeah, Mike Malott, unfortunately, the biggest stock dropper on the card. Let's talk about some other stock risers on this card as well. I suppose you could put Raquel Pennington in this only because she was an underdog. I think those in the know, including myself, felt like she was going to win. So I don't really put her as like a big stock riser. You know, Magny, I wouldn't really put that there because yes, Magny won this fight, but he could go fight someone else and probably lose. So that's, you know, like he could fight like a Gilbert Burns again and probably lose that fight. So I don't really put him in that category as well. I mean, Neil, if anything, sort of prolonged his UFC career. Chris Curtis, just because, you know, he was on that 2-fight skid, you know, the one was a no contest and then he lost the fight to Gaslam. So he definitely rose up a bit. Evlov has got to be the other big winner on this card for sure. He gets my honorable mention. We're going to do honorable mentions right now. You can make a case for a title shot with Evloev. Now, look, I know people don't like the fact he goes the distance, but I want to remind people that Arnold Allen is tough to finish, and not even Max Holloway could finish him when they fought. So I think for me, Ivoyev looks like he belongs in that title picture, at the very least a contenders fight next. He's another guy that rose a lot, and I like this fight. Again, I know there's some people who didn't. They thought it was boring, whatever. I'm not in that category. I thought he rose really well. And the last big riser on this card as well, for me, I know there's a couple good wins here, is Sean Woodson. He was not expected to beat Charles Jourdain. If you look at the optics now with Sean Woodson, he's 11-1-1 now. That's a great record. This was a very big win for him. Most likely, you would think he's going to get a ranked opponent next. I'm curious to see what he can do because he's such a big guy for the weight class. And if you watch the post-fight interview with Woodson, he had a terrible camp. He almost pulled out of the fight. So the fact that all this happened, and he's a 6'2" with a 78-inch featherweight, that's going to be very dangerous for the division if he can continue to make the weight and fight at his ability and beat guys like Charles Jourdain. Like, that's a very, very good feather in his cap here. So I would say the biggest winner, like I said, is Duplessis. But some honorable mentions for sure, Ivoyev and Sean Woodson. I was really impressed with Woodson. Just from the opening bell, he really sort of, captivated the crowd. Also have to mention Jasmine Jasvidius' win, but again, she was a big favorite going into this fight. So if we're talking about stock, you sort of expect, to me, her stock's the same. I mean, she was a minus 400 going into this fight. She lived up to that. Same sort of thing with Jillian Robertson as well. And then as far as some other stock droppers, Myra Silva, said Raquel Pennington was boring. And then, they both kind of put on a boring fight, right? And she wasn't able to finish Pennington. So Silva's stock definitely dropped in this fight. I don't think Strickland's stock dropped at all, to be honest. I know on the scorecards he's not the champion anymore. He lost his title, but Sean Strickland to me is as popular as ever with everything that happened this week. I think he's pretty much where he was before, because fans will ride with this guy whether he's got a belt or not. And then probably another one would be, actually there's two. I'll give him a tie here for honorable mentions. Arnold Allen and Brad Katona. Arnold Allen, that, this was an opportunity for him to, get back in that contender spot. Again, tough loss against Max Holloway. In this fight, he clearly lost. I did see a few people saying, Allen, I thought Allen won the fight. I don't know about that, man. I don't know what they were watching. To me, Ivoyev did the most in that fight. And for Brad Katona, same sort of thing with and actually you could even put Jourdain in this category too. I mean, Katona and Jourdain, this is in Canada. They're having the fans on their side. They got two fights where they're favorites and they didn't come through. Big stop drop, and more so for Katona because this is his second stint with the UFC. Not a good look losing to Garrett Armfield, and I like Garrett a lot, and I think Garrett's made a lot of improvements, but Katona should win a fight like this, and at 32 years of age, where does he sort of go from here? I don't really know. Obviously, they'll continue to give him fights, but this was a bit of a setback here for Katona, and Jourdain just is kind of doing the thing he's been always doing, which is where, he'll win a few fights and you get excited and you think, okay, this is the time he's going to turn the corner. And then he loses a fight like this where, I thought, I know it's a split, but I thought he lost. And to me, it looked like there's some room for improvement here for Charles Jourdain on the card. So that's pretty much it. Again, I think Duplessis and Malott, Duplessis, again, the biggest riser on this card. I think big things are ahead for him and Mike Malott. His stock, like I said, not so good right now in terms of him losing the way he did against Neil Magny. So we'll see what happens with Malott. But I like I said, I think he has the ability to turn it around. He's a very composed, talented fighter. I think it's just a matter of fixing a few things. And again, this was a big jump up going from Adam Fugit to Neil Magny. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you like this concept? I mean, I did the video last time, got a lot of good feedback. Do you want me to continue doing this? Figure we're going to try doing these videos a little bit longer here, for the next little bit anyways, and see what the reception's like. And do you agree with my stock risers and fallers on this card? I would love to hear from you in the comments. That would be awesome. I'm James Lynch. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, X, YouTube, everywhere at Lynch on Sports. It's always the same handle, and I appreciate you tuning in. I gotta go for a nap, guys. I barely got any sleep. I don't know if you heard my other videos. I left the press conference at 4:30 in the morning, went straight to the airport, caught a flight, got a couple hours sleep on the flight, but I'm kind of running on fumes right now. But everything is timing, right? So I wanted to get these videos up as soon as possible, because I know a lot of you out there want to talk about what happened last night, and I'm happy to do it here. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys later, and appreciate you tuning in.